Three girls who left their countries to work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as housemaids were found deceased and buried in shallow graves around the coastal city of Yangon. Obviously, someone was hunting down maids, but why? Before we proceed, my name is Annie. Please consider subscribing if true crime is your type of thing. This is the case of Awdah Ahmed Salem. In the year 2008, a young boy was arrested on the streets of Yangon in Saudi Arabia. The authorities had arrested him for begging on the street, which I'm guessing is obviously against the laws of the kingdom. Knowing fully well that he could easily get a harsh punishment for his offense, he decided to volunteer information to the police in exchange for a more lenient punishment. He was also hoping that maybe if the information he had was good enough, they would just let him go scot-free, right? I'm not sure how old this boy was, I just know he was very young, and what he told the police would lead to the arrest of one of Saudi Arabia's most dangerous criminals. This boy told the police that he had seen someone stab a woman on the streets of Yangon. The police were at this point interested in knowing what he knew because at the time they were dealing with the unsolved cases of young Indonesian women who had been reported missing. No one knew what had happened to them and their bodies had not turned up. In fact, they just had no leads. When this young boy told them he saw something, they began to urge him to talk. What this boy said next shocked all of them because he told them that he had seen his own father attack this woman on the streets. No one was expecting that. Who would ever think that a young child would tell such tales about his father? But they looked into it and this opened up a whole can of worms. It all began in September of 2007 during the month of Ramadan in Yangon, which is a coastal city west of Saudi Arabia. There was this housekeeper, a young beautiful girl called Halima, who came in from Indonesia to look for work. So she was working as a housekeeper. Somehow she met and started a relationship with a man called Awdah Ahmed Salem. Salem himself was originally from Yemen, but he had been living in Saudi Arabia for years. He was a married man with children, but Halima never knew Salem was married. He just sweet-talked her and offered to save her. You know, young girls go to these countries to find work and make something out of their lives, but most of the time, the reality is not what they have in their heads. It always doesn't turn out to be what they were told it would be like. So some girls end up falling for these men who come to them with the promise of marriage. Oh, I will marry you, make you mine, and take you out of that situation and change your life. That was exactly what Salem did to Halima. Even though their relationship was not exactly physical, they maintained this relationship over the phone for a long time. In all this while, Salem was seriously persuading Halima to run away with him. So one day, he sent her a message again asking her to come away with him, and this time she agrees. Guess she thought in her mind Salem was going to offer her a better life as he claimed he would. They made the arrangements secretly. Then on the D-Day, September the 8th, 2007, she gathers her stuff and disappears from the home where she was working. He picks her up from their meeting place on the northern cliffs of Yangon and takes her to one of his guest houses. I'm not exactly sure what this Salem did for a living that he had more than one guest house. But anyways, Halima, when she arrives, is blown away by how much care and comfort Salem could actually provide her. She tries to settle in, but unknown to her, Salem had other plans for her. And just when she wasn't expecting it, he pounced on her and assaulted her brutally. It's like he had been having this thought at the back of his mind for a long time as to what he would do to her should they meet face to face. After doing this to her, he then grabs a stick and hits her with it severally until she was barely conscious. Then he grabs a pillow, puts it over her face and finishes the job. So now that he has this body in his guest house, what then was he going to do with it? He had to think fast before he gets found out, so he comes up with a plan to get rid of the body. Salim loads Halima's body in his car and drives to a remote area that is not often frequented near the Al Nakil highway and buried her under a sand dune. He was so sure he had gotten away with his crime because who was going to go digging at the sand dune? Mind you, this crime was committed in the holy month of Ramadan, like I mentioned earlier, a month where faithfuls fast and pray and rededicate their lives. This man was going about unleashing evil instead. The fact that he even chose this holy month to do this is very, very sick. Anyways, time goes by and it's almost 2 years later, let's say a year and a half at this point. Halima was still missing and everyone thought she might have just run away like most of the maids do, especially when they are not being treated right by their employers. The police were informed that she was missing though, so there was actually an open missing persons case that was still being investigated as regards Halima missing. But the Saudi police were on a standstill because they didn't have any leads to go on. Meanwhile, Salim was just living his life normally like he had done nothing. One day, he found himself in an industrial area in Yambo. It's not exactly clear why he was there, but he noticed another maid who was Indonesian sitting alone by herself in a car park. I don't even know how he was so sure this person was a maid. I'm guessing maybe if you look a little bit different, not like a local, he will pick you out. Because then if he does anything to such people, they don't have families in Saudi Arabia. There is no one that will look for them and all of that. A maid might just be reported missing and that's that. It's not even clear what this lady was doing, just sitting in the car park all by herself. Perhaps it was her day off and she needed to clear her head, or she was having issues with her employers, or she just was waiting for someone. So Salim gets closer to this young woman and strikes up a conversation. They get talking and, as a sweet talker that he was, he managed to somehow convince her to follow him somewhere. Eventually, they ended up in some secluded place. Why did they even trust him that much to think being alone with a stranger was safe? Salim attacks this woman the moment he felt that they were alone in this remote area. He again, like in the case of Halima, assaulted her brutally. Then he choked her until she was unconscious. Instead of just leaving, this man grabs a huge rock and smashes it over this lady's head 3 times, making sure she was really gone. So now that he had this second body, he needs to dispose of it, right? He puts the body in a garbage bag that he had in his car and then digs up a shallow grave right there at the crime scene and buries the body. Satisfied he had taken all the precautions that he required not to get found out, he walks to his car and drives away. Fast forward to 6 months later and Salim was back at it again. The evil in him that he had awakened could not just stay down, so he struck again. One day he went around the area of Al Asiali footbridge where he spots another maid, another Indonesian. Listen, at this point I don't even think this is a coincidence at all. I believe he went looking for targets because he was specific about whom he targeted. He knew where to find these girls. As all of Salim's victims were girls who came from Indonesia to Saudi Arabia to look for work. Mind you, Salim is feeling invincible and untouchable at this point. After all, he had gotten away taking 2 lives before. And just like the last time, he manages to sweet talk and convince her to follow him to his house. Yes, this time it was his house, the same house where he lives with his family, his wife and his kids. When they got to his home, Salim attempts to force himself on her and she fights back. She's not about to let a man she just met have his way with her. Salim becomes angry at this point. He begins to handle her. That's not what she thought she was following him home for, so she pushes him off, both out of his house and begins to run down the street. Salim chases after her. He wasn't going to let her get away. At this point, she knows she is running for her life because she sees Salim running after her with a sharp object. Seeing that she was getting away, he quickly enters his car and chases her down the street. He manages to catch up to her and he jumps down and begins to strike her with a sharp kitchen utensil. He strikes her about 3 times and she falls to the ground. He then drags her into the vehicle and brings her back to his house where he was said to have poured acid on her. It's not clear why he did this because obviously she was no longer alive. He didn't have to do that, but he did. So after pouring the corrosive substance on her, he takes the body to an unknown place and buries the body, then returns home like nothing had happened. Unknown to him, his young son had seen what he did. The disappearance of this maid doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, Saudi Arabian police began to investigate these vanishings. I mean, 3 maids who were all Indonesians just vanished into thin air and no one had no information that could help. There was no leads, nothing to go off of, and that was how it was for 4 months after Salim had claimed his third victim. But all that changed when the police arrested the young boy who coincidentally turned out to be Salim's son. I'm kind of curious to know why Salim's son had to be begging on the streets when his father supposedly had money and had maintained more than one guest house. But anyway, Salim's son volunteered the information to the police that he had seen his father strike a woman on the street with a sharp utensil. The police had to look into this, and what they found out about Salim was just insane. So the police, upon investigations, finds out this Salim guy had been arrested quite a number of times on issues relating to domestic violence. Salim had on numerous occasions beaten the crap out of his wife and kids. Now you understand why he was bold enough to bring his last victim home. He knew his family wouldn't say a thing because they feared him like he was some sort of semi-god. The police also finds out that all this while he had been arrested for one crime or the other, he had been using fake passports and documents. In fact, he had numerous passports and documents with different names. That was why they didn't even know he was a criminal in the first place. If one police station gets him arrested, he presents one document. If another arrests him, he presents another document. Just like that, he was tricking the authorities into believing he was a Saudi student when he was not even a student. The police knew there was more to this Salim guy when they discovered all of this, so they put a surveillance on him. Someone was watching him constantly, 24/7. Soon enough, they found out that he had this fake passport Indian number, so they had to bring him in for using fake documents. The major reason he was on their radar was for the woman his son had claimed to have seen him harm, right? But the police used the opportunity of the fake documents and passports to get a search warrant. When they got the warrant and searched his home, they discovered even more documents that were all fake. In addition, they went through his phone and they found pictures of different women. And one of the women in the pictures turned out to be Halima, whom the police knew was a missing person for sure. So authorities interrogated him about the pictures, and Salim quickly came clean. He confessed to the crimes. He told them what he had done to these girls and where he had buried their bodies. Salim was afterwards formally arrested and held in prison while he awaited trial. His trial began in 2010. He was charged with murder, assault, and adultery, which is a criminal offense in Saudi Arabia. The prosecutors of this case demanded that, under Sharia law, Salim should be executed if he is found guilty. According to them, they wanted a capital punishment to prevent any pep that would think of being a copycat in future. He was to be executed by cutting off his head. This man, Salim, was one arrogant man. During his trials, he said that he would not be found guilty for sure, and if he was found guilty, he would appeal the sentence to the Supreme Court. So for 2 years, there was this back and forth on the case because of the capital punishment thing. But eventually, the Supreme Court said they will rescind the execution by cutting off of the head. And people were like, wait a minute, what is going on here? Then the court surprised everyone by saying he will be crucified, like he will be nailed to the stake, like how the Romans did in ancient times. It was then Salim thought to withdraw his appeal. He didn't like that punishment of crucifixion either, but it was too late. Ultimately, the execution was carried out on the 7th of August 2014. Salim was publicly executed in Yambo. His head was taken off his body. Then it was sewn back onto his body and put on public display for everyone to see. Saudi is not one of the countries you mess with when it comes to criminal offenses. It's better you just stay away if you know you're criminally minded. The punishment they met on criminals will be here, yet people will still not listen. The thing though is that people will still offend knowing fully well that their penalty is always very harsh. This case is not only about Salim, it also sheds light on how vulnerable the housekeeping community in Saudi Arabia is. We hear a lot of horror stories from here, and this is just one of those. Girls leave their countries to this place to make money and send back home to their families, but they end up getting missing or mistreated. If Salim's son did not rat him out, no one would have known what happened to Halima and the rest of the girls. Even at that, we don't even know who these girls are. We don't even know them by their names. Some of them, except Halima, are just referred to as maids. There are no pictures of them to refer to or for me to show you. The things that happens to maids in this place is entirely a different story of its own that we hopefully will look into sometime in the future. But for now, that is it for today's case, guys. If you like this content, please consider subscribing to my channel. And until next video, stay safe.